Welcome to The Explainer. Let's just jump right into a really hard truth today. You can literally be the absolute hardest working person in the room and still be totally ignored. You could be the smartest person in the entire building, hands down, and still have zero actual influence. So today, we're decoding the hidden mechanics of power. We're going to figure out why just being good at your job, well, it just isn't enough to get ahead.
It's incredibly frustrating, right? I mean, you've probably been there. You pull the late hours, you double-check every single detail so it's absolutely perfect, and yet someone else, someone who is honestly way less capable than you, ends up getting the promotion or the bigger budget or the best resources. You did everything right, so what gives? Why does this keep happening? Well, it's because we fundamentally misunderstand how organizations actually operate in the real world.
Let's look at two different professionals. Take person A. High competence, but incredibly low visibility. They're the one fixing formatting on a spreadsheet at 9 p.m. on a Friday, totally heads down, just assuming their amazing results will eventually speak for themselves. Now look at person B. Maybe they only have moderate competence, but they have sky-high trust and crystal-clear communication. Person B actually understands the boss's priorities and gets their project greenlit. Person B is the one who rises. Why? Because they haven't just mastered the technical stuff. They've mastered the human elements of work.
And this right here is what we call the competence trap. We all kind of buy into this comforting myth of a pure meritocracy. We think, hey, if I just build a better mousetrap, the world's going to automatically beat a path to my door. But honestly, it's just not true. Raw skill alone absolutely does not guarantee recognition. If people don't know what you're actually doing, or if they just don't trust you personally, well, your competence is basically trapped inside a bubble of irrelevance.
So, let's bring in author Robert Greene. He lays out the stark realities of power in his book, The 48 Laws of Power. He writes, "Everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing." Now hold on, this isn't about faking it or pretending to be someone you're totally not. It's actually a profound, unavoidable observation about human nature. Think about it. If your hard work is totally invisible to the decision makers in the context of the organization, it basically doesn't exist.
Greene makes the case that your reputation is literally the cornerstone of your influence. You actually have to strategically court attention for your good work. The big takeaway here for any focused professional isn't to go out and become some sort of manipulative villain. It's simply realizing that you have to actively curate your reputation. Because if you don't define who you are and what your value is, well, others are going to define it for you. Or even worse, they'll just ignore you entirely.
Now, let's look at the actual math of power. Bueno de Mesquita and Alastair Smith mapped this out brilliantly in The Dictator's Handbook. When you really break it down, a super clear, almost mathematical pattern emerges. Leaders in literally any system naturally prioritize the welfare of their small, essential group of backers over the broader population. And look, it's not necessarily because they're evil. It's just a structural requirement for them to keep their jobs and stay in power.
So this reveals the cold, hard mechanics of influence. It doesn't matter if you're navigating a massive government bureaucracy or a modern tech startup. Leaders always depend on small coalitions. And to those leaders, loyalty and alignment are often prized way above raw confidence. Plus, all behavior is driven by incentives. So if you want to be influential, you got to figure out what the leadership's incentives actually are and then align yourself so you become an essential part of their success.
Okay, but how do we actually do this ethically? Well, in another great book, The Laws of Human Nature, Robert Greene notes this really brilliant paradox. He says, the royal road to influence and power is to go the opposite direction, put the focus on others. So, true influence? It's not achieved by kicking down doors and aggressively demanding what you want. No way. You gain real power by becoming fiercely, genuinely curious about what the people around you actually need in order to succeed.
Which brings us right to psychologist Robert Cialdini's foundational book, Influence. Cialdini shows us that human relations are governed by these almost invisible forces, things like authority, social proof, liking, and reciprocity. Let's just think about reciprocity for a second. When you do a favor for someone, you naturally trigger this deep psychological desire for them to return it. You can build immense, completely ethical influence simply by giving first, offering compromises, and making yourself genuinely useful to the whole ecosystem.
This actually echoes a legendary piece of advice from Dale Carnegie. He quoted Harry A. Overstreet saying, "Action springs out of what we fundamentally desire." Look, if you want someone to support your project or promote you or fund your big idea, you can't just talk about what you want. Frankly, no one cares about your quota. You have to arouse an eager want in them. You've got to frame your brilliant ideas strictly in terms of what they actually value.
And doing this creates an incredibly powerful dynamic in the workplace.
Start looking for the connectors in your office. You know the ones. They naturally bridge different social and professional groups. By engaging in really smart, strategic giving, they help powerful, overwhelmed people organize themselves and fix bottlenecks. They use power by association, basically becoming the indispensable glue that holds completely different parts of the organization together.
So putting this all together gives us a definitive ethical power formula. Competence, that's merely the baseline. It's literally just the price of admission to get into the building. To achieve true influence, you have to add clear communication. You have to add relationships to build out those trust networks. You must actively curate your reputation. And you absolutely must deeply understand incentives. It takes all of these variables completely combined to intelligently and effectively navigate your professional environment.
Now, let's take a quick pause here because this is absolutely crucial. Whenever we start talking about power and incentives, people tend to get a little uncomfortable. But let's be super clear. We are not talking about toxic politics or backstabbing here. Manipulation is a zero-sum game, and eventually it just destroys trust. What we're actually talking about is aligning someone else's self-interest with your own. Cultivating influence based on mutual benefit and genuine usefulness, that's not manipulation. That's simply smart, ethical collaboration.
Okay, so how do you actually apply this starting today? Well, here are 5 highly effective, non-manipulative steps to become more influential right now. Number 1, become genuinely useful outside of your strict job description. Number 2, communicate clearly to make sure your work is actually visible. Number 3, speak directly to what other people value. Number 4, give credit generously. Seriously, this immediately triggers that law of reciprocity we talked about. And number 5, consistently deliver, building undeniable trust over time.
And you know, a huge part of building that trust is having the courage to actually speak up. True power in any organization comes from the ability to talk openly about high-stakes, emotional, or controversial topics. It's really about combining the confidence to speak truth to power with the humility to sit back and actually listen to their perspective. When you can safely navigate those risky conversations, people realize they can rely on you for reality, not just yes-man answers.
But as you start gaining all this influence, you've got to watch out for a sneaky new trap, becoming the bottleneck. The more we help people by just handing them all the answers, the more dependent they become on us. So what's the solution? Ask more, say less. By using a coaching approach, you actually empower your team to solve their own problems. And the irony here? Giving up that microcontrol actually ends up increasing your own status, your bandwidth, and your overall effectiveness. Ultimately, we really have to reframe how we view this entire subject. Power isn't simply about controlling other people or acting like an office dictator. At its healthiest, power is simply the ability to make things happen. And, of course, having the deep commitment to use that ability responsibly. It's about finally escaping that competence trap, so your talent, your hard work, and your brilliant ideas can finally see the light of day and make a real, lasting impact. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. When you look back at the absolute most successful moments in your own career so far, do you think your influence came more from your raw competence or from your relationships? Think about it. I really hope this explainer helps you navigate your professional world with both deep integrity and powerful impact.